healer who began his training with one of the last surviving traditional doctors of the Kiowa Indian tribe. He's absolutely fascinating. I've already enjoyed having a few minutes behind the scenes with him, but welcome to the show, Ben Oofana.
Thank you, Amanda.
Ben, I'm excited to talk to you. We were just talking about all the different places that you're going to be going coming up soon. Right now, you're in upstate New York, which is where my dad was originally from. So there's kind of a cool connection. And next up, you said you're heading to California, which is where I spent the last 14 years of my life before moving to Colorado. So we're kind of stomping on the same grounds here. It's pretty cool.
And I graduated from college in Durango.
Oh, very cool. Yes, Durango's a pretty cool area.
Maybe I'll offend somebody by saying ski Fort Lewis and earn a degree in your spare time.
I don't see anything offensive about that, honestly. That's pretty cool. So you originally wrote your book several years ago. You now have a blog that you primarily focus on. You've come a long way. You've learned so much. You're trained in martial arts. You've got all of this training in a medical background. What made you want to do all of this super cool stuff?
From an early age, even like 3, 4 years old. And those days, our parents often used the television set as a babysitter. And when the cowboy and Indian movies were on and the natives were getting wiped out, I'd be screaming and throwing fits. And when the natives were getting the upper hand, it'd be like, get them. And even as I grew into adolescence and the fascination continued to grow, and hearing about the traditional native doctors, the medicine men and women, and being so fascinated, captivated by those accounts of those visionary experiences, and thinking to myself, like, at 14, if I'm ever given the opportunity, this is what I'm going to do with my life. By 17, I've taken off on my own, still in high school. My car got me as far as Oklahoma, and it died there. And a friend about my age saying to his father, hey, Dad, Ben wants to go into the peyote meetings. And so this elderly Kiowa man said, okay. And even though a few of the other native elders were resistant to it, and yet this elderly man, Jack, for some reason said, okay, sure. And he said to the other native elders, like, this one is different. Let him come in. And they deferred to him and his authority. And being in the peyote meetings with these native elders, and that's where I met my mentor, Horace Dolkai, who was one of the last surviving traditional doctors among the Kiowa tribe. I was so afraid that he would say, no, this only works for native people. But when I asked him if he would, I said, well, I want to learn to do what you're doing. And he says, what are you doing this weekend? Can you start fasting? And I'm still trembling. And he's like, yeah, sure. And he had fasted those 2 days and nights in the Wichita Mountains. That time he was just determining if I was serious. And when I showed up 2 days later, after he concluded a peyote meeting, he just said, come on out to the Navajo Res where I'm living. And that was the beginning. And he would transmit portions of his own healing gifts to me. And a lot of these native doctors possess paranormal abilities. I mean, he would take physical objects like the end of a feather and physically project it into my body. I'd go into something akin to a seizure. And I'd feel that presence, that altered state. I was experiencing that presence in my body, and gradually had me, oh, yeah, going through the vision quest too. Typically 4 days and nights, no food and water, alone in the mountains or some other remote wilderness area to earn the right to work with these gifts of healing. And gradually, as that presence, that force began to take root in me, and he had me assisting him, working with some of his patients. I mean, one of the first times this elderly Navajo man, piece of heavy equipment had turned over on him. He's pinned underneath. It left him paralyzed from the waist down, and there are blood clots forming in his legs. And when he had me assisting, in this practice that the native doctors would use. This either they would take the end of a buffalo horn or sometimes with their mouth, applying to the surface of the body and through that suction. And when the blood clots came out of the back of this man's leg, and I was like, holy shit, it actually worked. I was in shock. And but I went back into college for 2 years. I needed time to reassemble my head. And people were gradually asking me to assist them, and they were describing feeling that tremendous force or that presence coming through me as I would work with them. So that's how that all began.
My gosh. And you had kind of a rough childhood. So the fact that you're now able to do so much to help other people, it's it's got to change kind of your perspective on yourself, I'm sure.
Totally. And there were the 2 years I was back in college. But as I began to work with people, it was like pouring hydrogen peroxide into an infected wound. And so what happened was during that time, I found myself forming attachments to women who were themselves deeply wounded. And so either there was this dynamic of abandonment, unrequited love, or some of them, just not reciprocating my desire, or few that were abusive. And so it was triggering this extraordinary emotional pain. And so instinctively, I taught myself, first I'd gotten into psychotherapy, but I was gaining the cognitive understanding of why I was a wreck, but it wasn't actually healing the trauma, but that instinctual sense of diving into the depth of that pain. And sometimes the pain was so excruciating, I found myself consumed by it. But at a certain point, I could feel it breaking open and coming out of my body in waves. And there were these profound emanations of warmth beginning to emerge from within. Sometimes I had to stay with the pain for hours even. But at that point where it began to break open, the emanations would flow from within. And I could feel that it was beginning to break apart those holding patterns that were so deeply wired and in freeing me, breaking me out of these cycles of forming these, that traumatic bonding. It was starting to break that down, and gradually I began to attract healthier companions for more meaningful, more deeply fulfilling relationships. Of course, this practice I described was very powerful, but it was also important for me to incorporate various therapeutic interventions. And there was a lot of, again, flailing blindly, not knowing quite what to do. So I was committed to discovering it's like, okay, I recognized how wounded I was. And it's like, this is totally unacceptable. I cannot continue to live like this. What does it take to heal these traumatic wounds? And so beginning to explore quite a few therapeutic interventions. Some were not that effective. I let them go. I was thorough. I would test them out for weeks, for months to determine what was truly effective. The interventions I found to be most effective were, say, deep tissue body work. And that's something that most of us have access to in any part of the United States, in Canada, North America, in much of Europe, even in parts of Asia. So if you're going through struggles like this, whether in your relationships or even just however you're struggling in your life, deep tissue body work is a critically important intervention because a lot of the emotion, a lot of the impressions of those lived experiences live trapped in our bodies. When we can make use of this intervention, very important to help us become more embodied and to bring this emotion up because we need to digest the lived experience and our subsequent emotional responses to that. And so the deep tissue body work helps to dislodge it from where it's trapped in our bodies. The other two interventions is in various cultures around the world, there are these traditions of where you have these individuals that possess various gifts of healing. And I want to make a very critically important distinction here because in the whole new agey thing when it came into being in the 80s, and it trivialized all these ancient spiritual traditions. And one primary example of this, you have people going through 3 weekend workshops, assuming the title of master healer. Can I use a little bit of language here?
Yes, I can mark it.
It's absolute bullshit. It's like, think about it. If you need the intervention of you required serious dental work, or the intervention of a surgeon, and how would you feel if you find out that practitioner, or no, that supposed medical professional had 3 weekends of training? Wouldn't inspire much confidence. And similarly, okay, if you are following that traditional medical route of allopathic medicine, it involves the years of undergraduate plus medical school that could easily be 8 years of training plus residency, internship. There's a lot involved. And so to train as a healer, here, for example, my mentor, years of training, but he would transmit portions of his own healing gifts. And then I would have to undergo the vision quest those 4 days and nights in order to earn the right to work with these gifts of healing. And I've gone dozens of times, not saying this to impress anyone, but October was my 60th time to go through this vision quest. And it's training in these disciplines that go back thousands of years. It's a lifetime of training. And there are other traditions like you find in Indonesia and Malaysia and the Philippines and different parts of Africa, Central South America. And so it's a very long, intensive discipline training that you go through. And usually it's not something you can get through a workshop. It's you apprentice with these traditional doctor healers, and it's many years of intensive training with your mentor and ongoing beyond that. And there's a difference too, also, what they call energy work, which is the lowest level. It's like preschool, kindergarten, whereas the indigenous healers all work as conduits. I mean, literally, we are conduits for other forces or beings that work at very high levels. I mean, actually going in, say, for instance, I work with a lot of people with histories of childhood emotional, physical, sexual trauma, sometimes wartime or combat experience, and what they refer to as the chakras, the layers of the aura. Those could be grossly damaged or disfigured. They fail to develop. You have individuals who are hugely dissociated. They just don't root firmly into their bodies. Much of their soul or spirit doesn't inhabit the bodies all to a significant degree. And the damage or disfigurement in the subtle bodies, the chakras, the layers of the aura, also reflect the fact that the organs and systems are just not functioning at all that great of a level. And the dysfunction as far as the biochemical imbalance of the brain and the distortion within the development of the neural structure within the brain. And so I'll see people where they just do what's referred to as energy work, and there's not that much difference. There's still that disfigurement in the subtle bodies. They're still holding all that highly charged, intrusive memory, impressions, the emotions, and And I'm saying this from a place of compassion too, because we need to increase the standard of credibility. You know, we're not playing here. We're dealing with individuals who are severely wounded by these deeply traumatic experiences. And when people do this low level, you know, energy work and these wounds are not healing, we need to bring up the standard of credibility and the level of work. You know, what is found among the indigenous healers in these traditions, as I said, among the Native Americans and in places like Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines. You find highly developed healers in places like Brazil and some other parts of the world as well. And so my desire in saying this is that people will seek out the healers that possess this level of competence and even go beyond to train with these individuals, because I can only work with so many individuals. My sessions are pretty lengthy, 3 hours in length. And so the in-person one-on-one sessions. And so I want to see this wounding heal, and even also on the physical level, where people are dealing with digestive issues like colitis and Crohn's disease or heart disease or stroke.
I have Crohn's
It's
disease.
You do.
I do.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
what would you do for being able to help somebody like me if you and I were in the same city, if we had the opportunity to work together?
Again, I work as a conduit, allowing this presence to work through me. And some people describe feeling this regenerative process as these beings, this presence works through me to go into the body to do reparative work within the digestive tract, or say if I'm working with someone who has suffered a stroke or
Mm.
suffering as a result of a traumatic brain injury because they were in a serious automobile accident. And so some people feel that presence going in, the regenerative process. Some people even describe a sensation of hands working within the body during the individual healing session. So it's a whole different level of work. I'm definitely not the only one who works on this level, but I'm saying seek out an individual such as myself or some of these indigenous healers, because it's a much higher, much more profound level of healing
Yeah.
that one will experience.
And there's so many of us that Western medicine has completely failed. You
Mm-hmm.
know, we are looking for help and answers and healing in ways that traditional medicine here in the US has not been able to provide in any way. You know, they
True.
give us medications, slap a band aid on it, and say, okay, you're on your way. We need people like you that actually know how to do the work. We don't need people that, like you said, have been through a weekend seminar and now rent out their time by the half hour.
Right. Yeah. And there are the fact that modern Western medicine has made significant contributions, because we also want to take into consideration that Native Americans, for instance, were decimated by infectious diseases such as cholera, smallpox, measles, tribes that were numbering in, say 20, 30,000 or more people. By the 1880s, 90s, maybe there might be 1,000 or even under 100 survivors, going from the 20, 30,000s down to, just a very small number of survivors. And it's very sad. It's the disease killed far more than the warfare, where the United States was systematically sending its armies tribe by tribe against, the and there were these massacres, and they were just, you know, just
Yeah,
killing everybody that they could, the warriors as well as elderly, the women, even infants. Sadly, it was genocide that was taking place.
absolutely. And they were so often misportrayed in the old movies and stuff that we grew up watching.
Yes, very much so. Yeah.
So I want to touch on the Vision Quest thing for just a moment. You've done a
Mm.
lot of Vision Quests.
Yes.
I know
Mm.
that You had previously answered some of my questions and stuff before we ever got into the recording stuff.
Yeah,
You had mentioned in some of the writing that going through your first vision quest brought up a lot of traumatic experiences for you. Do
it
you
did.
still have that now? Does that still happen?
It does. We go through these experiences, these traumatic events of one form or another, and often repeatedly over the course of our lives. I would say the worst of it has pretty much cleared up. And but there are elements or traces of it that continue to surface. And even to do this work at this time in history, there are a lot of people that say they want to heal, and yet they're not necessarily willing to do what it takes. They want someone to come in and wave the magic wand. And yet there is a tremendous amount of work involved in healing. And say someone comes to me, for instance, they just want the physical discomfort, their condition to be magically resolved. And on the emotional level, we internalize these traumatic, deeply wounding experiences. We experience emotional responses that arise in relation to those traumatic events, and they're held within the body. And so as I work with people, I also teach this series of meditation practices that I developed, wherein I'll describe the practice. You bring whatever event, challenge you're facing to the forefront of your awareness, acknowledge those experiences, the individuals involved. And you're doing this with your eyes closed. And what do you feel in response to it? What emotions, sadness, anger, grief, fear, whatever, anxiety, and where are these feelings situated in your body? And bring your awareness into the depth of these feelings and sensations, breathing very softly, deeply, all the way down to your abdomen, expanding your rib cage. You stay present with these feelings and emotions, following them as they go through their progression. Now, some people, not understanding the healing process, they just want the emotions to be taken away. And also they don't understand that it is a process. It's an ongoing process. Like we have this model of medicine, take these medications or go through this intervention, have something surgically removed, and you just go on living as are existing. And yet, again, not understanding that it's a process. And so it's sometimes there's resistance. Some people can be flaky. Some people can even be assholes about when things are coming up and they don't want to deal with it, or they think they're expecting some instantaneous miraculous cure, but they're not willing to do the work. And so it's like, oh, this is a process I'm not willing to, they don't want to invest. They could spend thousands of dollars and they eventually will, going through these expensive medical interventions that cost them the thousands and all the inconvenience, and their bodies not blowing up on them or not functioning. But it's like, okay, to undergo a series of 10 sessions. And but if you think about it, the extent of the wounding that we experience over the course of our lives, trauma, emotional wounding, starting from many instances infancy or early childhood through our adolescence. And so we carry this long history, and the people going through breakups and divorces, loss of a job, and the major financial setbacks that people incur. And so because of that, we carry years, decades of this in our bodies. And so people need to understand it's a process. There are times where, say, within 3 sessions or 5 sessions, I've had people bounce back after a devastating breakup or divorce, or maybe with colitis, for instance, ulcerative colitis, in 5 or 6 sessions, profound healing take place and they're no longer in pain or passing blood in their stools. And yet, the roots of this emotional wounding or the physical manifestation within the body may show significant resolution in as few as 5 or 6 sessions, and yet there's a great deal of work that needs to be done in terms of working through the layers of processing, digesting these lived experiences and the backlog of trauma and highly charged emotion that's held in the body. It's a process that takes time. And so a lot of people fail to realize that, and they can be cheap and lazy when it comes to healing. It's like, no, you're making an investment, not only addressing the immediate emotional wounding, your physiological health issues, but it's building a stronger, more resilient, healthy foundation within your body that it's not only just addressing the immediate health concern or the immediate crises, such as if you've gone through the devastating breakup or divorce or job loss or death of a loved one, but it's investing in your ongoing health so that you stay more youthful, vibrant, and relevant, vital as the years and decades are going by.
I think that is a beautiful thing. And you're right. So many people, they want that magic fix. They want that magic wand. They want somebody else to do the work. They're not ready to
Yeah.
do the work themselves. But when people are ready to do the work, how do they reach out to you to start checking into it?
The best way is to go to my website, benoofana.com, Benoofana. So benoofana.com is the best way to reach me. There is a free ebook if someone out there, if you're going through a breakup or a divorce, it's gettingoveryourbreakup.com. You could download that. Also, you could schedule a free call and just go to refiningrelationships.com. That's relationships plural, so refiningrelationships.com. But mainly, the main resource, there's many articles, there's videos, there's tremendous resources on my website, just benoofana.com. That's the best way to reach me.
And that's where your blog is too. So
That's
definitely
where
head
my
over there.
blog, and there's a contact page with a form where you could message me, and there's a phone number on there to my Google Voice number. So yeah, and you could sign up for my weekly insights. There's some issues with Google and Yahoo, the email providers, and I'm having to get that sorted out right now, but hopefully all that will be sorted out and up and running quickly.
So it's time for my last question. It's always my
Sure.
favorite question because the answer can change depending on how your day has gone.
Yeah.
But what is one thing that you truly love about yourself that's not related to your physical appearance?
Wow. I think the thing I would love most about myself is that commitment, that determination to continue to heal and grow and evolve. And it's something that I sometimes struggle with. I see in other people is this thing of just wanting to get comfortable. But the thing is, you cannot sit very long. This notion of like, okay, I'm cool now. That's resolved, because they're no longer in crises, because you cannot sit still for very long without sliding into stagnation.
If you've enjoyed tonight's episode, please make sure you check out the episode description. You'll find links there on how you can learn more about this guest, links to connect with them on social media, and how to support the podcast. Remember, I don't get paid to do this. My boss is a bit tight fisted, but I can say that. I work for myself.